All the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?
Hello, and welcome to Where Am I to Go podcast. Today, before we start the show, I would like to bring up some business things that have kind of been on my mind so that you can know where to get more Where Am I to Go. First off, I'd like to talk about the Facebook page at Where Am I to Go podcast. It's on Facebook, and we've been posting some wonderful pictures of some of the places that we've been and some of the adventures that we've had. Not everything that we go and do is made into a podcast. And so we take pictures at different places and post those pictures so that you guys can enjoy some of the different places we've been. Also, I really am interested in listener feedback. I have an email address at whereamiitogopodcast@gmail.com. Again, that is whereamiitogopodcast@gmail.com. I would love to hear some of the listeners' comments and some of their ideas of places that might be interesting to visit and go and do. Today we're in Salina, Utah, and we're with Rodney, and we're at the CCC and POW Museum here. And the CCC stands for Civilian Conservation Corps. And that was something that operated during the Depression, as far as I know. I've always been interested in the CCCs, and Rodney said he'd be kind enough to open up in the middle of winter and take us through. I can tell you there's not a lot of heat in here, so this podcast may be a little bit quick. But talking to Rodney already, I've learned a bunch, and I'm excited to share this with you. So welcome, Rodney, to Where Am I to Go?
Thank you. The CCC program was started in 1933 at the beginning of the Depression by President Roosevelt. It was geared for young men ages 18 to 25 who were not married and who were unemployed. It was under the direction of the military, so their uniforms and everything was provided for them. The building we're in now was the headquarters for the commander. The building that the POW Museum was part of that. These two buildings were lined up facing east and west along Main Street, about a half a block from here. The barracks that the young men stayed in were in the big parking lot across the street where the rodeo club has their big parking lot. They had 7 barracks there. Each barracks would handle 50 young men. The pictures that we have here show about 130 to 150. The young men would sign up for a period of 6 months, and then they could sign up for 3 more 6-month periods, making a total of 2 years. They were paid $30 a month, which today doesn't sound like much, but back then in the 30s, $30 was a good amount. However, they had to send $25 of that home to their family, so that left them with $5, but then they had penny candy, and a bottle of pop was a dime or whatever, and so they were taken care of, and also it helped these young men, plus helping their families. So we had 35 camps here in Utah. The statue
35 camps?
35.
Okay.
Yeah. The statue out in front of this building is an original statue of a young man they used for make the mold. It is owned by the Heritage CCC Heritage Fund. The goal was to have at least one statue in every state. We have 2 here in Utah, this one here and one down at Zion National Park. The purpose of the CCC program was to help in conserving the planet, as you would say, helping with the climate change and everything. But they planted a lot of trees, they did a lot of road work, they did a lot of terracing, they built parks, they built lookout towers for the Forest Service. In this area of Salina, they built the campground at Fish Lake, the campground at the Gooseberry Ranger Station, and the campground at Maple Grove, which is between here and I-15 going to the west. They also, we have a place here in Salina which we call Soldier Canyon, and it was considered to be a floodplain, so they built 3 dams across there, and they built little rock and cement overflows so that the water would build up behind one dam and then go to the next, so it would kind of control the water coming out of that canyon. They also built a road through there.
Wow.
All of the work that these young men did was pick and shovel handwork, so they had to pass a very stringent physical exam. And the road that they built up through that canyon, in places it was just rock that they had to go through. They did a lot of terracing work up east of Nephi on those big tall mountains. You can see some terracing, and that's a sample of the kind of work that they did. They did work here around the Salina Creek area to prevent high water in the spring from washing the banks away. They built a big waterfall on Salina Creek, just about a mile or two up the canyon on I-70. You can see it as you go to the east. That helped the flow of the creek. They also built another one, a bigger one, up farther up the canyon. You can't see that from the freeway, but they built that. They planted a lot of trees around the area, and it was a good program for these young men. It gave them something to do, and the work that they did was very constructive for the area. The 35 camps we had in Utah, we don't know how many were in each camp, but they would sign up for 6 months, and then some would transfer, so there was a transfer in and out every 6 months. So the building that we're in now, they tried to keep these buildings original as they could when they refurbished them.
Okay.
The buildings are made out of 1x12. They were covered with tar paper for insulation. When they refurbished them, they put wood on the outside and painted it black. This building and the next building also has the tar paper on the front.
That didn't keep for real warm winters, did it?
No,
I mean, it probably wasn't a whole lot warmer than what it is right now, other than the potbelly stove right in the middle.
That's the potbelly stove that they had. The desks are original. The typewriters are original. We have the 48-star flag that we have hanging here. The reason that we have the gun cabinet here is that when the CCC program ended in 1942, they ended it because they needed the young men for the military. And at that time in 1942, they brought in the German prisoners of war.
Can we back up quite a ways? Okay. So first off, the CCCs were founded, you said, in 1933.
Right.
And why were they founded?
To help with people that were out of work, the 18 to 25-year-olds. And if they were out of work and not married, they could sign up for this program.
But they were out of work because of the Great Depression.
Right.
The Great Depression hit in 1929, which is hard to believe that that's only 90 years ago.
Yeah.
I mean, that's a long time ago.
Yeah.
But the Great Depression hit in 1929.
Yeah.
And then Roosevelt was elected, what year? I'm not sure. But part of his restructuring or his New Deal program was the CCC program.
Right.
And so they brought in these youth that were between 18 and 25 that were looking for work, 25, okay,
18.
That were looking for work, and they put them to work in these situations. Now, did they pay all of their room and board? You said that they had barracks. Did they get fed also?
Everything was taken care of for them. The military took care of them.
And what branch of the military were they under?
I think it was the Army. I'm not sure. But
okay.
They were under the direction of the military. So everything, their uniforms, their clothing, their food, their lodging, everything was taken care of. That's why they sent 25 of that $30 home to their families.
Okay. Plus their families were having a hard time because of the Depression.
Right.
Okay.
And the $25 would help some to their families when they would have to send that. So.
Okay. And so they were working, did they have regular hours? Were they working like 5 days a week, 8 hours a day? Or were they working 12 hours a day, 4 days a week? Or were they working 8 hours a day, 7 days a week?
They were working just a regular 8 hours, 5 days, as far as I understand.
Okay. And did they have to go through a boot camp like the military personnel did?
No, the thing that they did was they gave them a very stringent physical exam, which probably would be doing some work like they would be doing to see if they could handle that kind of strenuous work.
Okay.
But it wasn't, as far as I know, there was no boot camp as such, but they did have to pass that very stringent physical exam.
And did they have to have any skills before they showed up? So they were trained on the job
Right, yeah.
in lots of different fields. I know, like in the town close to where we are, we have a wall all the way around the fairgrounds that was made of rock. And also in Yellowstone Park, there's several different bridges and stuff that were all rock work. So I'm sure a lot of them came out being stonemasons.
Yeah.
And then, like you said, they built dams and they built parks. And so they came out with skills when they were done. Maybe kind of like the Job Corps now or something.
Yeah, they actually were trained on the job, as it were. They came into the program green, and then they worked with others who had been on the job for a while, so that they did get training as they progressed through the system. So.
Okay, and you said that they had 7 barracks here, and each one would house 150 or would house 50 men.
Yeah.
And you said that there was about 150 in the camp at the time.
That's as far as the pictures that we have, the photographs of the groups. 130 to 150 is all we have in those pictures.
So in other words, half the barracks were left empty.
Yeah.
Or maybe they just weren't packed in as tight as sardines.
Right.
Okay.
Right.
Yeah. And then this camp closed in 1942, and that was because we got involved in the European conflict of World War II, correct?
Right. And the young men were needed for the military.
And so then they had to go to boot camp, or were they able to transfer right on in? Do you know
they
that?
had to go through the regular military process.
Okay.
Yeah.
And was this as regimented as the military? I mean, were they up at 5 o'clock in the morning with a bugle call and have to do the raising of the flag and have to do the marching or any of that stuff, or was it a little bit more lax?
I think it was a little more lax. The thing is they would have to get up for their meal period. They had their meal time set.
Okay.
But as far as regular military marching and everything, that was not part of the process because they were out working during the day rather than having to be in the camp doing the other kinds of things that they did in the military. But when they closed the camp in 1942, they took the barracks and some of the administration buildings over to Delta, to Topaz.
Okay.
And they reconstructed them over there. And that's where they housed the Japanese Americans during the war.
So they had an internment camp here also?
Yeah, over in Delta. It's about 75 miles west of here.
Okay. Do they have a museum there? I'm just curious.
Yes.
Okay. I'm going to have to try and hit that one tomorrow because where we're from, they had a Japanese internment camp in Powell, Wyoming, which we did. One of our very first podcasts out was the internment camp at Powell, Wyoming. And then we've also done a couple of other prisoner of war camps. We did one in Arizona and we did one in Douglas, Wyoming. I was not aware of the World War II prisoner of war camp situation in the United States. I always thought that the prisoners of war must have been in other places until probably 5 years ago when all of a sudden this came on my radar, and I'm amazed at how many camps there are. But back to the CCC. So the barracks got transferred around and sold off, except for these two, or did you have to bring these two back?
These two were part of the administration buildings lined up east and west on Main Street. They just moved them up here and reset them.
Okay.
And then when the city used them for storage buildings for quite a while. When they decided to do the museum, they put the wood on the outside and painted it black. And this is the original flooring, and everything that's in this building is original.
Okay.
So that they did what they could to keep them as original as they could.
Okay, and the CCCs, now did they bus them out to different communities, or did they all stay within like maybe a 40 or 50 mile radius of?
Well, they stayed within a certain radius. They had 35 camps. So that would mean we have 29 counties. So some counties would have 2, some would have 1. So they had the camps all around the whole over the area. And they would just take them to that area that they served because they had so many camps in Utah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Well, that's really interesting.
Yeah. Now this is the original telephone they had.
That's cool.
And we're looking at it. We're looking at a square box telephone that's about a foot square, has a regular old style phone receiver on the side, and then a hand crank.
Yeah.
So they must have had to hand crank so many cranks in order to get the call out?
Down where the Family Dollar store is now, on that corner there was an old two-story house, and they had converted the first floor to the telephone exchange. And you've seen pictures of these ladies sitting with their headsets on in front of the board, and it'd light up and they'd plug in, and that's what they did. And they crank this number, and then they'd crank it, and then it would light up on that board, and they would plug in, get your number, and then they'd plug in and dial it. These young men could go down to that exchange and make calls home.
So they could call home.
Yeah, they could call home and find out how their parents were doing, families were doing, and like that. But
and where did most of these guys come from? If you had 35 camps in Utah, did most of the people come from Utah, or were they all over? And were they assigned like the military assigns people to go to Germany or Vietnam or wherever they get assigned to? Was somebody in New York assigned to come to Utah, or was this all choice?
I think I don't know exactly the answer to your question. The only thing that I can think of is that they put them where they were needed.
Okay.
So if this camp was low on numbers, then they would put them here. If there was a camp that was high on numbers, they might take some of those and bring to the lower numbered camps. But it was so that they could keep a good flow of work, guys to do the work in the area that they needed to do.
Okay.
I don't know, we have a video of this. I don't know if you'd want to spend time with that.
Not on the podcast.
Okay.
I do podcasts as a verbal deal because I really hope that people will stop in and see the actual museum.
Okay.
I try to describe different things as I see them, but it's just one of those things that I want people to come experience. Yeah. They need to get out of their houses and do something besides watch the History Channel.
Yeah, yeah. These CCC boys, in that period of time that they were working, they planted 3 billion trees.
3 billion?
3 billion. They made 92,000 miles of road. They did 600 to 800 camps, like at Fish Lake and Gooseberry. And they did all of the terracing work. They did a lot of these lookout towers for the Forest Service. So it was a major project. One of the more successful government projects that they had.
That's amazing.
I had a gentleman ask me, he says, well, maybe we should start one today like that. And I said, good luck.
Yeah.
Good luck.
Exactly. And these buildings these administration buildings are what? Probably 35 or 40 by 15 or 18? Yeah. So they're not real big. Now, were the barracks bigger than this?
Well, we have a picture back here. I can show you. This is the commander's bedroom here.
Okay, so the commander stayed in the administration building. Yeah. And they've got a bedroom set up here with a little cot, commander sitting here with his little radio, a picture leaning up against the book of his girl, and he's in uniform. And it looks a lot like a military uniform that he's wearing, where the commander's wearing military garb while the workers were wearing work garb.
See, this when they took pictures, they had them in uniform.
Okay. And they're all wearing ties and all of that kind of stuff. Yeah. And then on the other side, you have a little latrine. Did this have running water at the time?
It did. It had running water. The shower is that mirror has fallen off the wall. I'll have to get it. The shower is made out of metal with the wood floor in it.
Oh, really?
And some of them ask, well, where's the toilet? Well, at that particular time, they had to go outside for that.
So they were still outhousing it.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Well, that's interesting.
This is a picture looking a little bit down on the camp. These are the administration buildings lined up here. These are the barracks that the boys stayed in. Okay,
and we're looking at a picture that has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Then the 2 administrative buildings. It looks like a large tent and a couple of other small outbuildings.
Here's another picture over here. These are the barracks that the young men were in.
Okay, and they're all lined up in a row, and then facing, like you said, east and west.
These are facing north and south.
The barracks are, and then the administrative
these 2 buildings are the ones we'll be in today, and then there were other administration buildings up here.
Okay.
That they took, and these are the ones they took down, and there's some of these others and moved more to Delta.
Okay.
You know, they said they put them together with screws because they knew they'd have to take them down. So it'd be easier to get the screws out than have to pound the nails out of the board. So, yeah.
That's kind of interesting. I didn't know that they had screws like, I mean, we use a lot of screws nowadays, but I didn't know that they were using a lot of them at that point in time.
This is the original license plate for the CCC.
Really?
That they found when they were digging here.
And that says US CCCs, and it has the logo or the emblem, stamped emblem, and it says Department of Agriculture. Okay.
Yeah.
Wow, that's a cool license plate. It's a little bit discolored, but
well, it was in the dirt when they found it. So
really,
these are the tools that they used. This is the original transom that the engineers used to do their survey work. This posthole digger over here, I had a gentleman come through and he says, that's the most awkward, useless piece of tools that I ever got a hold of.
I've used some that look very similar and they're a pain in the butt.
Yeah, he said I tried to do a post hole with it, I threw it away and got my shovel and finished my post holes.
Well, you know, I think I'd rather use that post hole digger than I would that scythe.
Oh, definitely, yeah.
Because running that scythe all day long would not be fun.
No.
And then we've got some picks and some, it looks like kind of a sledgehammer pick.
Yeah.
And a shovel and a CCC hat. Right. What's the story with the CCC box?
I don't know. I'm sorry. I don't know. That was just...
We've got a wooden box that's about 12 inches long, 8 inches deep, and 4.5 inches wide, and it says CCC 71618 on top.
Yeah, that
so
was the number of the camp.
Oh, that was the number of the camp.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, these are ropes that they used and everything. So.
Well, that's cool.
That's cool. Yeah.
Okay, so that kind of covers the CCC part of the story.
Yeah, and that, like, we have the video, but then the stuff that's in, I've told you almost what's in there, but this just shows you in the video what it was, how the workers did, what they did, and things like that. So it runs about 7 minutes.
Okay. Well, let's take a walk on over to the POW camp, and we'll talk about the POW aspect of this. Okay. When we first walk in, what we see is a big diorama of the camp.
It's a scale model of the camp. This white strip here would represent Main Street. And this was in that big parking lot again where the barracks were, only it went clear back to the hill. The rodeo grounds weren't there then.
Okay.
So it went clear back to the hill. They had 43 tents, 3 guard towers. This one over in that corner, one over here, which would be on this hill across the street.
Okay.
Which was about 30 feet taller than it is now. They've leveled it off to park equipment on it.
Okay.
We had 250 prisoners here in this camp.
And where did the prisoners come from?
They came from the South Africa Corps where they were captured.
Now, were most of these prisoner of war camps from the African front?
Some of them, it was from all over, but the ones that came here were from that area.
Okay, because the ones that were in Douglas, Wyoming were Italian and German soldiers from Africa, and the one in Arizona was the same situation. And so I find that really interesting that the prisoner of war were coming over from the African front, not necessarily from the European front.
Yeah, we had 371,000 prisoners in the United States.
Wow.
They had 550 big camps and then a few hundred smaller camps. We had 15,000 prisoners here in Utah.
And at this camp or different camps?
Well, the big camp was in Ogden.
Okay.
And they had one at Fort Douglas, one in Orem, and then this one. That's why we're called Branch Camp Number 4.
Okay.
We had the 250 prisoners. When they talked about bringing the prisoners here, the people in the town were a little bit concerned about having it so close to town because there's a canal that runs just to the west of those buildings along that way.
Okay.
And our house is just on the other side. So they were really close to the camp. But they soon found out that these young men were not going to be a problem. They were very courteous young men. They just would go around the compound and do their thing. There was no threat from them that they could find. Eventually, some of the townspeople got very well acquainted with the prisoners. The prisoners were allowed to go downtown with the guards. Dr. Noyes and Mrs. Lau, who was his nurse, were the basic medical staff that took care of the prisoners. They would come up to the camp if they needed to come up here, or they could take them down to the hospital if they needed more acute care. The prisoners were able to get what they wanted. The food they got was provided by the government, but there were some of the German prisoners that were very good cooks. So they would get the government food and then they would cook it themselves how they wanted it to be cooked.
Okay.
So it was a really good program for them. The two buildings in the center here are the mess hall and the kitchen for the prisoners. These buildings over here are the mess hall and the kitchen for the guards. That long building is the dormitory where the guards would stay. The prisoners were, when the war started, a lot of the young men were drafted or they were enlisting, and the farmers had a hard time getting labor to do their farm work.
Right.
So the government gave them permission to use the prisoners out on the farms.
And they did that in Wyoming also. Yeah.
And they would take them out, and one of the merchants said he always knew where the prisoners were going because the wife of the farmer was in buying goodies to make lunches for the prisoners out on the farm. So the farmer paid the government 80 cents a day for each prisoner, and the prisoner was paid a nickel or a dime a day. They were paid in script, and we have a copy of that over here.
Now, when you say in script,
just a little page like this, right?
oh, just a little. Well, it looks kind of like a dollar certificate. It says military payment certificate.
Yeah.
10 cents, and another one here that says 5 cents.
And they said, well, they told them, well, that's not very much money to be paid. And one of them said, well, the carton of cigarettes only costs $1.80. So I guess they were okay if they could buy a carton of cigarettes, you know. Anyway.
Well, if everything else was provided and they were prisoners anyway. So, I mean, I hate to say that, but that's kind of the truth.
Yeah. And they interviewed the tents were not just tents on the ground. They had here's a cutout showing the flooring and how the bunks were in there.
And how many men would they house in each tent? About 8 men. And how big were the tents?
I don't know what the size was.
I mean, they look like they were good-sized tents, maybe 20 by 20 tents or something.
And they had the heater in them and everything. So.
Right.
They interviewed some of them and asked them, well, why didn't you try to escape? And they said, well, we don't know where we are. We don't know where we would go. The food is excellent. Our lodging is good. Our clothing is good. So why would we want to escape? And some of them even said they'd like to stay here after the war was over.
Did they, or did they all get sent back?
They all got sent back. Also, they interviewed some of them again, and they said the same thing. They said, well, they're not shooting at us either. Well, that kind of changed on the night of July 7th, which was a Saturday evening, and July 8th, which was a Sunday morning.
What year?
1945.
Okay.
There was a guard named Clarence Bertucci who was kind of a rogue soldier. He had been court-martialed twice and was up for a third court-martial. And the court-martials were not of a severe extent that he would have been dishonorably discharged. He refused to go on guard duty or something, similar. So they said, well, send him to the ends of the earth. So they sent him to Salina.
Oh, okay.
And so he came to Salina, and he kind of had it in for the Germans. He told some of the other guards that he was going to get his Germans. And so Saturday night, the 7th of July, he went over to Redmond, which was an outdoor dance pavilion on the shore of Redmond Lake. And he was there for the evening, and he came back to Mom's Cafe, and he told the waitress there that something was going to happen at the camp that night. He didn't tell her what, but he said something was going to happen. He went on duty at midnight and climbed up into his guard tower, loaded his gun with 250 rounds, and opened fire on the tents.
While they were sleeping?
Yeah.
You've got to be joking.
And he hit almost every tent. The prisoners were up and running around, and what in the world was going on? Some of them were killed in their bunks. Some of them were wounded and came up, and they fell in the compound and died. He killed 8 outright that night, and the 9th one died 5 days later. In all, he killed 9 and wounded 20. And one of the prisoners, he was hit in the foot, and he rolled out on the floor of the tent, and he had a backpack in front of him, and later that day he noticed a hole in it, and he opened it, and he had a can of shoe polish, and the bullet had lodged in that can of shoe polish. And Dr. Noyes and Mrs. Lau and the medical staff took care of him, and he said had he been in Germany, they would have automatically amputated his foot because he was hit in the toes. But they took care of him, and he only lost 2 toes, so he was very happy with the medical care that he got. Mr. Bertucci was never brought up on charges.
Really?
He never showed any remorse for what he had done. People thought maybe he was drunk, or he was mentally ill, or maybe a member of his family had been injured in Germany and he wanted to get revenge. But this was a premeditated act that he did, because previously he had told some of the guards that he was going to get his Germans. He spent the rest of his life in and out of hospitals, and he died in 1969 of a brain hemorrhage, and he was in a mental hospital. He was eventually declared mentally ill, and so even though he may have been brought up on charges and convicted, he would have probably spent the rest of his life the way he did anyway, in mental hospitals. But I like to tell people that I remember the good part about how the prisoners were treated. They were really well cared for. But the thing is, this incident that Mr. Bertucci did kind of overshadows any of the good that the camp did while they were here and the way they were treated here. Mrs. Lau, her husband, was born in Germany, and he spoke fluent German, so he was the interpreter for them, especially the day that Mr. Bertucci did this. They had all the wounded down on the hospital lawn, and he was there to help interpret if they had questions and problems to take care of. But the 9 that he killed are listed on this display over here, and the 20 that he wounded, their names are listed. The youngest one he killed was 21, the oldest was 48.
What a travesty. I mean, wow.
Yeah.
What a story.
Yeah. There were some, Mrs. Lau got to know the prisoners very well. She was assigned 7 of the wounded prisoners, and she took care of them as if they were her own sons. And when they got better, they took them, they came back. Some of them came back after they had got home, and 3 of them came back and wanted to thank Dr. Noyes and Mrs. Lau for the excellent care they got. But they had passed on, so they went to the cemetery and paid their respects there. Later on, 4 of them came back to the high school, and they had an assembly, and they told the students how well they were cared for here. And it was quite an ordeal for the community to try and comprehend what in the world was going on. Why did it happen? My house is about 300 feet from that guard tower, just across kitty corner across the road.
Oh, really?
Yeah, and we were awakened, and my father and I came out on the front porch, and we could hear the shooting and hear the cries of the prisoners. And,
really?
And
you remember this?
Yeah. And
wow.
We were there, and later that morning they brought the mattresses out and lined them up on the west side of that big building that the dormitory is, and you can see the stains on the mattresses that they lined them.
How old were you?
6 years old.
Oh, I do remember that.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow. What a story there.
Yeah. But people ask me, oh, how can you remember? And I said, well, there are things that you remember even back in the early years that kind of set. And so I can remember coming out on the front porch and hearing that. And my mom says, don't go out there, he might shoot you. But his gun was trained on this camp up here. He wasn't worried about any other.
But you didn't know what was going on either, did you? No, yeah.
All we knew, we could hear the shooting and the cries of the prisoners. So my father, Dean Nielsen, who was in charge of the work crews that went out, came by later and got my father, and they were allowed into the camp. And when Dad came home, he wouldn't talk about it. He said it was just such a horrendous thing to see. And everything.
Well, shooting on totally unarmed people for no reason other than you didn't like Germans. I mean, that's just, it's hard to imagine, I guess. Yeah,
and the only reason that he had to stop is that the other guards got up in the tower and subdued him, because he was getting ready to reload when they got to him. But there are some good sides to it. Like I say, I like to remember the stories that the prisoners told. about them, their care and everything. And we have on this wall here, there are 2 letters that they wrote back to Mrs. Lau. These 2 letters here. This is a jewelry box that one of the prisoners made out of popsicle sticks and matchsticks for a family in Aurora.
The artistic talent that a lot of these guys had was amazing. The POW camp in Douglas, Wyoming, they painted murals all the way around the mess hall. And so they've got these big murals of horses and some of the Western things that they were doing when they were out helping the ranchers. And I see some other pictures here of...
This picture is very interesting. One of the prisoners was a very good artist, and he wanted to do a portrait of the 4-year-old son of the farmer. So one morning he took his art supplies with him and went into one of the buildings and got this young boy to sit for him. And he started the painting, and the guard came in and said, "No, you can't do that. You got to get out and work. You'll have to do that." This is a picture of this man when he was 4 years old.
You can still see the resemblance.
And the prisoner did that from memory.
Wow.
Wow.
That's amazing.
These 2 here are pictures of the South Pacific that they had never been there, but they painted what they thought it would look like.
Probably pretty close to what it should look like.
Yeah.
Okay, and then we come back into this area.
Yeah, and this display there, these are the K rations that they used. The names sound pretty good. I don't know what they tasted like, but I had a gentleman come through and he said, "I know exactly what they are and what they taste like." He said, "You open a can of peanut butter and that much grease on the top, but when you get to the peanut butter, it tasted pretty good." And the other thing that really amazes me is that they use this little tool here to open the cans.
Right, the P9?
Yeah. I thought, how in the world can you open a can? And he said, "Hey, you get used to that. You can just go around a can in no time."
I've used them a lot, camping and stuff. Oh yeah, they're great. In fact, I think my Leatherman has one on it that I've used to open cans at different times.
We had a guard tower out here by this building here that represented the guard tower that Mr. Bertucci was in. But we had a very strong wind come through one day, and now all we have is a pile of lumber sitting out there against the building. So it kind of did its thing on our guard tower.
And then you've got a gas mask over here and
the tent pegs.
Tent pegs, okay. There's some big tent pegs.
The jacket that they wore.
Oh, so that's what the prisoners of war had to wear every day was they had a specific uniform.
These are samples of the bullets that in the gun. They were all on a strip, so it just kept feeding through. This little tool here is the cricket that the paratroopers used when they bailed out. They couldn't talk to each other, but they could click that and use it for their communications device.
Okay, I've never seen one of those.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then this is the military truck. It's a 1942 GM ton-and-a-half truck.
Okay.
They built 168,000 of them, and when the war ended, rather than pay the freight to bring them back home, they gave Russia 151,000 of them on a Lend-Lease program.
Right, yeah, Lend-Lease is an interesting program also.
Yeah.
Yeah, so in other words, we built the Russian army as we left.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's kind of a dangerous truck in some ways. The crank start on the front of it. I was taking a gentleman through and he says, that thing, if you built up compression behind that and it backed up on you, it could break your arm.
Oh, I'll bet.
And then the tires are split rim, and they take the bolts out and pull this part out, and then they can slide the tire off. But if there's pressure behind that, that could push that out and kill you.
Oh yeah, those split rims can be dangerous.
We had a gentleman here in town that was working on one, and he was very badly injured down at one of the service stations. And so, but it's a heavy duty truck, and I tell him, I says, I don't know how they would change one of those if they had to get out on the road. If they had a flat tire, it'd be kind of hard to change one, but
well, and this truck's in awesome shape. They've done a really nice job on the restoration.
Well, they got it in Wyoming. A gentleman in Wyoming donated it, and they just repainted it.
Who in Wyoming? Is it the Military Museum in Du Bois, Wyoming?
Sterling, Wyoming, is it? I don't know if it tells you on this plaque or not.
No, I'm not seeing it there.
No,
Because Wyoming, a guy just moved to Wyoming here a few years ago and opened up the largest military vehicle museum in the nation. And he's got all kinds of restored trucks and that kind of stuff. I didn't know if maybe it came from there or if it was just a private party.
It was just a private party. That
Okay.
I think, is there Sterling, Wyoming?
I'm not sure. Sterling doesn't ring a bell to me.
No, we got it from Wyoming.
Okay.
And then when they repainted it, they just painted around that artwork that was on there.
It's got a pistol packing mama with a lady in cowboy boots and a gun strapped to her hip and nothing else.
Yeah.
Yep.
And this poster that we're walking to, when I first looked at that, I said, knock that one. Okay, now I know.
It says knock the hail out of Hitler, Heil. Let's keep them pulling for victory. It's got a picture of Hitler on the back of one of the military GMC trucks falling off.
Yeah. And again, we have a excerpt from the movie. I don't know if you've seen it, Splinters of a Nation. That was on PBS about 2 years ago.
I don't hardly ever watch TV, so no, I didn't see it.
It is a documentary that PBS did of the whole prisoner of war thing around the country.
Okay.
And we have an excerpt, which is the actual reenactment of the shooting that happened here. But it runs about 8 minutes, so you may not have time for that. But.
Well, it's extremely cold. I have the time, but I don't know if I have the wherewithal to do that right now.
Understandably, yeah.
Now, your museum is open, you said, September through...
It's open year-round.
Oh, this museum's open year-round?
Because they have my phone number on the wall and they can call me anytime.
Okay. And
every day except Sunday.
And you'll come down and open it up just like you did for us.
I just live a block away from here.
Okay.
Down the street here, so anytime, 6 days a week.
And it's pretty easy to find. You take the only exit to Salina. I'll get it before I leave, maybe. But you take the only exit off of the freeway in Salina.
It depends on which way you come. If you come I-70 or do you come I-15.
Oh, okay.
So we have four. We have coming from I-15, coming from 89, and coming from I-70. We have 3 entryways to Salina.
Okay, well, what I'm going to tell you is you go to the stoplight and you turn to the east and you drive down to 700, which is 7 blocks, and the museum is here right by the cemetery. It's really not hard to find, as long as you know which way you're coming in, which I didn't. I had to ask Rodney, and he very kindly told me where to go.
This is the article that was printed in the Tribune, the Salt Lake Tribune, it says the guard killed 8 Nazis, but these young men were not the true Nazis. The only true Nazis were the member of the SS under Hitler. And so these were just young men that had been drafted or conscripted. And like I say, the youngest was 21, the oldest was 48.
And now, were all these prisoners German, or do we determine that some of them were Italian also?
The ones we had here were all German.
They were all German.
But they were Italian prisoners as well in the country. The 371,000 included Germans and Italians.
But this one here was a strictly German camp.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Rose wrote a book called The Salina, Utah Massacre. I don't know if you've read it or not.
No, I haven't ever heard of it. Yeah, Is it for sale in your gift shop?
We had some here, but we ran out. But
I guess I won't be buying one from you then.
Well, you can go on his website and probably get one.
Okay.
But he interviewed a lot of the people involved in some of the prisoners' families, everybody, and he wrote the book about it. And the thing that really stuck out to me was his final sentence. He was just young boys who wanted to go home. 9 of them didn't go home, but they were buried at Fort Douglas in Salt Lake in the Military Honors Cemetery. This is the memorial that they did for the 9 that they buried in Fort Douglas.
Okay.
Some of the prisoners were allowed to go to the funeral. They were all dressed in the same, they were not allowed to dress them in their military rank. So they all were dressed in just a regular uniform. So, and they were not allowed to play German music at the funeral. So They were buried with honors in Fort Douglas. And
Okay. And the name of this book was Salina, Utah Massacre, 8 July 1945. If anybody's interested in getting the book,
yeah.
I think I'll probably see if I can't go on Amazon and see if I can get it or something.
Also, if you go on the internet, splintersofnation.com, you can see that movie.
Okay, Splinters of a Nation.
Yeah.
Okay, and I'll have to look for that too.
It will show you this documentary that they did.
Okay.
The Desert News had an article as well, but they didn't mention anything about being Nazis or anything. These are the names of the young men who died and the 20 that he wounded.
Okay.
Yeah.
And I don't speak German, so I probably can't pronounce half the name, especially that one right there.
Yeah.
I'll probably mess that one up big time.
Yeah. This is the Mortical building. That's this next building over here. This is the original building on the original foundation. The only repair work they've done to that is putting new tar paper on the roof, maybe a board here and there, but everything in the building is original, and it's on the original foundation if you'd like to walk down.
Sure. You have some displays in there also?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
Oh, cool.
Now, this is an original 1945 Willys Jeep. They were fortunate enough to get original parts when they restored it. They use it in our parade on the 4th of July and other activities when they have occurrences and like that.
Okay, and this is just your basic military Jeep. It's all set up really nicely. You've got your pick and your shovel, or your axe and your shovel, and your little brass fire extinguisher, and looks like it's ready to go to war.
Right. Now this is they lift these timbers up and drive their vehicles over them, and then they'd go down in the pit underneath to do their service work.
And you got music in here.
Yes, this is the music of our time. We had some kids from the school come through, and they said, "What in the world is that?" And
it sounds just like the old 78 records when you put it on the...
That's what's playing, yeah.
Oh, okay, it is. It's actually...
Well, it's not actually playing.
Oh, isn't it? Well, the record's spinning.
Yeah, but they have it... My heaven, look at that. Yeah, that wind we had really caused some drifting. Yeah, they
got a little bit of snow inside the building.
Yeah, they have a continuous play tape underneath there.
Okay. Yeah, it's even got the little scratchies of it sounds just like the old 78.
Yeah.
I like those old 78s. I've kind of got my own little collection.
Yeah. And this is the moviola, which, when Disney started with their animation, they used the flip card.
Right.
This shows about a little 5-minute Western video in that flip card kind of motif.
Really? 25 cents and you can watch the movie.
Yeah.
It's probably a little bit cold in here for that to want to be operating too.
And then they have the stove that they would heat. Sometimes the stovepipe would get orange, it'd get overheated, and there's no way they could just let it go. But the coal that they used
lump coal.
Yeah. Now, and this up here, we asked the students if they knew what that was, and they said, well, that was the computer of our day.
Yeah, it's a great big slide ruler. That thing's huge.
That's the teaching model.
Okay, I was going to say the slide ruler is what, probably 5 foot long and 10 inches wide?
Yeah, this is the one they have out when they take out in the field.
Right.
Then they had the smaller ones that they used in the classroom.
And the slide ruler, you could slide the center section out and be able to do your calculations.
Now, a guy who knew how to use these, and he came in, he said, let me show you. He tried to explain how to solve a problem, and he moved. I said, oh, forget it. But they said that when NASA started their space program, this is what they used. They didn't have the computers.
Really?
They used the
slide rulers.
Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah.
Yep. And then you got a little cot and some old Coca-Cola bottles and.
I don't know if you did when we were growing up. When we bought a bottle of pop, we had to pay a deposit on the bottle.
Yeah.
And we'd go around, pick them up, take them back to the store and get a nickel a piece. And
I was going to say, I never paid the deposit, but I sure picked up a lot of bottles that somebody else paid the deposit on, and I got the nickel.
right. Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way you bought your candy bars and stuff, was
Right.
walk around
Yeah.
the side of the road picking up old Coke bottles.
They have the old jar that they made the pickles in. And did you ever do homemade root beer?
With the capper?
Yeah.
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 Yeah. My neighbor used to do a bunch of that, and we had a bottle capper.
Yeah.
Again, you guys would have to go to an antique store if you don't know what we're talking about, but it's got a lever on it with a little cap that would just fit the size of a Coke bottle,
and then
the old Coke bottle cap that you pop off with a bottle opener,
You would crimp it down.
and it would crimp it down over the bottle once you got your root beer put in there, and then it would ferment, and then when you popped it, you'd have your carbonation.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And this, there are a lot of these around the theme parks around the country.
Oh.
This one has 4 different pictures here, which are unique to this area.
And you can flatten your penny with the logo of the
Right.
camp here.
Now, I told them when we wanted to flatten a penny, we'd put it on the railroad track and let the train do it, but
You know, I tried that a couple of times, and I looked for hours for that penny. I think they actually stick on the train wheel and deposit them 100 miles down the road, so you were probably picking up somebody else's penny.
yeah. So I tell them that we had a flat penny. We didn't have a nice picture engraved on it like this does, but we could flatten a penny that way.
Right.
Yeah. So, yeah.
Yeah, I found one time by Multnomah Falls in Oregon when I was growing up, and it was a 1919 penny. I could still see the year on the
Yeah,
stretched out
yeah.
Lincoln.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yep. Well, this is really cool. Nice display of things and very interesting stories. Do we have more to see?
This is it.
Okay. Well, before we go, I didn't get a chance to talk to you a little bit about the area here around Salina. I said it right? Salina? Dang it! I'm going to get it here before this is over, maybe. Anyway, but this area is really a cool area. It's downright cold today.
Yeah.
But this area sits kind of in a whole bunch of mountains right off the interstate, or I guess right off of 2 interstates.
Yeah, well, the I-15 is about 25 or 30 miles to the west of us.
Okay.
But the Highway 50 goes from here to Scipio to I-15.
Okay.
And then this I-70 goes through Richfield and connects with I-15 over by Cold Ford.
Okay. Well, this area looks like it's got some great recreational opportunities
Yeah.
as far as off-road vehicles, fishing, I'm assuming rock climbing, all kinds of things. This looks like a fantastic area to just come hang out and recreate.
Yeah, we have there's the Great Western Trail unit set up, which is about, I think, 3,000 miles of trail.
Really?
We have one of the trailheads up on I-70, just maybe 6 or 8 miles up the canyon, and there's a big trailhead there where they can park and take their vehicles off. We have all kinds of trails up Gooseberry, and the trails go, well, they have every year they have what they call the Rocky Mountain Jamboree. Which they have people from all over the world coming here in 4-wheelers.
Really?
They take them on tours for a whole week. They take them on tours of this whole area. Some of the rich guys, they send their 4-wheelers over here in big trucks, and then they bring them in big trucks here to Richfield, unload them, and that they have 800, sometimes 800 people in their 4-wheelers.
Really?
That goes through that jamboree every September.
Wow.
Yeah.
We may have to come back.
Maybe.
Yeah.
This sounds like fun. And so was this an old mining town, or what started this town?
The big thing here, they had a coal mine up the 2 coal mines up the canyon.
Okay.
One was called the Severe Valley Coal Mine, which was a vertical pit, which they went down about 300 feet. Let me turn that music off.
Oh, okay. I was going to say, I hope that the music's not too loud for what we're trying to do here.
They would go down vertical, and then they would branch off to mine the coal. And they had another mine farther up the canyon, which was owned by the Mortensen family. and they would do everything by hand. They'd drill and blast with dynamite. And then they sold out to a big corporation. And so that mine now, Sufco mine, goes 24/7. And we had two big trucking companies here. They had about 100 these double trucks hauling coal, plus a lot of independents hauling coal out of there.
Wow.
The big thing here was the sugar beets were the big cash crop.
Okay.
When I was growing up, and we would have, during the summer, we would go out and thin sugar beets, and then in the fall, we would have a couple of days off in school called the fall harvest. They'd go out and harvest the sugar beets. Now it's basically the coal mines, and then the cattle. They have cattle and the alfalfa and corn and like that. But it is a very beautiful area in the summer. The green fields, the mountains are green, and in the fall, and the change of colors and everything. It's a beautiful town. But it started in the mid 1850s when the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints wanted to expand out of the Salt Lake Valley.
Okay.
The president sent the people here to look at the area and see if there was an area that they could maybe support 28 families or so. And the people came here, and the Salina Creek was here and the river was here, so they figured that it was adequate that they could bring families in. And when they got here, they didn't have time to build houses. They had to get their crops in to sustain them through the winter. So they lived in dugouts. They dug holes in the ground,
Okay.
put roofs over them, and that's what they lived in the first year they were here.
Okay.
But my great-great-grandfather was one of the original settlers of Salina.
So you got a little bit of history here.
Yeah. The Rasmussen family, Neil C. Rasmussen, he was one of the people that came down with the first to see how, if they could, sustain a community here.
Wow.
And then when they got here, they had the Indian problem with the Black Hawk Indians, so they had to move to Sanpete County for a while. Then they came back and built a fort here in town, so that when they had problems again, all the families could gather in this fort to protect themselves. So it's an interesting community, but
I may have to come back sometime when it's a little bit warmer and stay and play.
Yeah.
It sounds like a lot of fun, to be right honest with you.
Now the road that goes up Gooseberry, finally they oiled it from here clear around up to Fish Lake. Before it was just a gravel road, and it'd get washboard and you'd shake your kind. But now the campers come in, and it's amazing the number of people that go up Gooseberry and up this area, and the trails that they can find and everything. It's just, I used to go up there with me, and my friend and I would go up and travel the trails, and he'd take me in places I had never seen. I lived here all my life. I was born and raised here, and he took me places that were just amazing on those trails that they
Wow.
through there.
We're gonna have to come back.
Yeah.
Anyway, Rodney, I so appreciate you spending this day with us, especially with the temperature the way it is and everything else. This has been very educational for me.
Thank you.
And hopefully for everybody else listening.
Thank
I always finish out my podcast by saying the world is full of wonder. People need to get out and explore, see what's out, see what's happened, see why we're here, why we are where we are now. And everybody have an absolutely wonder-filled day.
Haul the roll and go, where am I to go? Meet Johnny, where am I to go? For I'm a young and a sailor lad, and where am I to go?